When you stop forcing life, everything changes. It seems simple, almost banal, like one of those catchphrases we see thrown around on social media. But try living it. Try for just a moment, letting go of the reins that you hold so tightly. The reins of your career, your relationships, your image, your success, and observe what happens when you stop pushing the river. Sounds scary, doesn't it? Because we have always been taught that everything worthwhile comes with effort, that it is necessary to fight, conquer, dominate. Life for us has become an arena, and we, the gladiators, tired of trying so hard to control that which by nature cannot be tamed. But what if? What if that's precisely where the problem lies? What if our suffering is less about what happens to us and more about how we resist what happens? Because see, the river of life never stops flowing. It goes over rocks, through curves, through rapids. He doesn't argue with the path. He doesn't say, I wanted to go that way, or that shouldn't have happened. The river just goes. He dances with obstacles, gets around them, welcomes them, and that is precisely why he is free. The truth is that much of what we call hard living is actually forced living, a script that doesn't flow because we are constantly trying to impose a direction, as if we were in a canoe paddling against the current, sweating, fighting, exhausting ourselves, without realizing that the current is not against us. We are the ones against it. There is a silent tiredness that does not come from what we do, but from how we do it, with tension, with fear, with the obsession of controlling all results. Modern anxiety, that invisible epidemic that afflicts us so much, is perhaps not about having too much to do, but about having lost the ability to simply be. And remember, this is not about passivity. It's not about crossing your arms and waiting for everything to fall from the sky. It's about aligning yourself with the flow of life rather than resisting it. Imagine the difference between dancing to the music and trying to lead it. A good dancer doesn't impose the step. He feels it. He listens to the rhythm and responds. That's also how it is with life. When you stop forcing, you start listening. Begin to perceive synchronicities, signs, intuitions. Life stops being a battlefield and becomes a subtle conversation between you and the universe. But why is it so difficult to let go? Because we are afraid. Fear that if we are not in control, everything will go wrong. As if the universe were a threatening chaos and we were the only guardians of order. But this is an illusion. An illusion, deeply rooted in a fragmented view of ourselves. We believe ourselves to be separate entities, islands of consciousness surrounded by a hostile world. And in this scenario, of course, everything seems dangerous. Everything needs to be predicted, managed, guaranteed. But the deeper truth, the one that mystics, poets, and sages have been telling us for millennia, is that you are not separate from the flow of life. You are the flow itself. When you breathe, it's not you who's pulling in the air, it's the universe breathing through you. When you love, it's not something you do. It's something that happens spontaneously, like a flower that blooms. Even the thoughts you believe you control, where do they come from? Do you choose them, or do they just appear like clouds in the sky of your mind? There is a deep mystery here, an invitation to humility, to realize that the control we believe we have is largely a comforting fiction, and that real freedom is not in controlling life, but in collaborating with it. Alan Watts used to say that living is like playing a musical instrument. You don't play a symphony to get to the last note. The purpose of music is not its ending. It is the dance, the movement, the pleasure of sound. And so it is with life. When you stop forcing, you start dancing. You begin to realize that there is nothing to achieve because you are already here. That now, this very moment, is not a springboard to something better. It is the very stage where everything happens. And when this perception sets in, something magical starts to happen. Things flow. The right people appear. Opportunities arise. Creativity awakens, not because you're pulling the strings, but because you've finally gotten out of the way. And that takes courage, Because letting go of the controller is like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there's a net underneath. But paradoxically, it is only in the jump that we discover the wings. Because when you stop forcing, you allow life to surprise you. You open yourself to the unexpected, to the new, to the miracle. And maybe you'll realize that everything you've been trying to control is already conspiring in your favor. But in its own way, not yours. Let's continue where we left off, delving even deeper into this reflection. When you allow life to reveal itself, instead of trying to shape it with your rigid expectations, you realize something fundamental. Reality was never the problem. The problem was the lens through which you viewed her. Imagine for a moment that everything that happens has a reason for being, not a logical, calculable reason, but a poetic, almost dancing reason, an invitation. Every failure, every disappointment, every deviation from the planned path is actually an opening, a crack where light enters. But if you're too busy trying to put together the pieces of a plan that fell apart, you might never notice the beauty of what's emerging behind it. There is a profound difference between living guided by fear and living guided by trust. When you force life, you act from fear of losing, of not being enough, of being left behind. You hold on like someone adrift at sea and clinging to a piece of wood, forgetting that you can swim. But when you let go, when you trust, something changes. You begin to act from love. And love is not passive. He is a creative dynamic, but tension-free. Of course, he doesn't need to prove anything. He simply is. And that's when everything changes. Not because the external world magically changes, but because you change. You stop seeing life as a series of tasks to be completed and start seeing it as a journey to be explored. You start asking yourself not, how do I achieve this, but what does this have to teach me? You stop living on autopilot and start savoring the present moment. And then paradoxically, everything starts to work better because you are aligned, because there is coherence between what you feel, think, and do. What happens when you stop forcing life is that you reconnect with something that has always been there, your essence. A silent, deep presence that observes everything without judgment. This presence is in no hurry. It has no ambition. It doesn't want to be someone else. It simply is. And the more you align with this essence, the lighter everything becomes. Decisions become clearer. Relationships become more authentic. Work stops being a prison and becomes an expression. Because you're no longer trying to fit into a mold. You're allowing yourself to blossom from within. And make no mistake, this does not mean the absence of pain. Life will continue to bring losses, challenges, uncertainties. But the difference is how you relate to it all. You no longer fight the waves. You learn to surf. You don't try to avoid pain at all costs. You welcome it, listen, understand what it wants to show. And a lot of times it's just saying you're moving away from yourself. Because every time we force life, that's what we're doing, moving away from the natural flow of existence, trying to be something we're not, chasing after ghosts. However, when you stop, breathe, and allow yourself to be where you are, the way you are, without masks, without defenses, a peace begins to emerge. Not that superficial peace of someone who pretends everything is fine, but a radical peace which springs from the recognition that you are part of something much bigger, and that something knows what it is doing, even when you don't. It is a delivery that has nothing passive about it. It is a conscious, active, lucid delivery. A choice to trust, to participate in life as a dance, not as a war. Alan Watts said that trying to control the universe is like trying to hold water in your hands. The more you squeeze, the more it escapes. But if you open your hand, it remains there, resting in your palm. That's also how it is with life. She doesn't want to be dominated. She wants to be welcomed. And deep down, we all know that. We know that there is an intelligence pulsing behind everything, an invisible order, a secret harmony. We can call it God, Tao, the universe, nature. The name doesn't matter. What matters is recognizing that we are inside it, that we are not the conductors, we are part of the symphony. And when you truly understand this, not with your mind, but with your heart, everything changes. You stop chasing time and start living within it. You stop living for tomorrow and start celebrating the now. And in that now, everything is always beginning, everything is alive, everything is dancing. Let's continue deepening this dance with life even more. And then you realize something that was previously hidden beneath the noise of your haste. Life doesn't need to be understood to be lived. In fact, it's precisely when you embrace its mystery that it reveals its fullness. Look at children. They don't need to understand the logic behind a sunset to marvel at it. They don't need to control play to immerse themselves in it. They are simply there, present, open, whole. And why then do we lose this as we grow up? Because we've been taught to trade presence for performance, spontaneity for strategy, joy for duty. But there is a call ever present that whispers behind the noise, come back. Come back to yourself. Return to the now. Go back to simple. It is not necessary to solve all the problems, nor to know all the answers. Sometimes wisdom lies in simply not resisting. To stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking yourself, what is life trying to show me here? This change of perspective transforms everything, because you stop being a victim of events and become a partner in existence. When you stop pushing, you start to notice the signs. They were always there, but you didn't see them. An unexpected conversation. A book that appears at the right time, a delay that saves you from an accident, small coincidences that are actually synchronicities. As if the universe were talking to you all the time, waiting for you to slow down enough to listen. And the more you listen, the more you align. And the more you align, the more things flow. This doesn't mean everything will always be easy. It just means that even difficulties start to have meaning. They stop being walls and become portals, because you're no longer running away from them, you're crossing them. He's learning, it's growing, and not in a forced, imposed way, but in an organic, natural way, like a tree that doesn't need to make an effort to grow. It just responds to the light. This way you also begin to respond to life instead of fighting against it. Alan Watts liked to remember that the universe is not a machine, but an organism. And organisms don't work by pieces that fit perfectly together. They live, breathe, transform. You are like that too. You are not a project to be completed, but a being in constant discovery. And the beauty of it is that there is no rush. There is no finish line. There is only this moment, this one now. And if you can be fully here, you will see that everything you were looking for is already present. When you stop forcing, you start trusting. And trust is a radical act, because it means living without guarantees. It means dancing with the uncertain. But it also means making space for the new, for the unusual, for what really makes sense, and not just for what was planned. Often it is when everything gets out of control that the true path reveals itself. Because sometimes what life is trying to give you is much bigger than what you are trying to achieve. And in that state of trust, of conscious surrender, you begin to live in a different way. You don't care as much about the image you project because you are more interested in the truth you inhabit. You don't run after connections because you start attracting people who vibrate on the same frequency. You don't need to prove your worth because you recognize that you already are, that you always have been. And this inner freedom changes everything around, because the external world is nothing more than a mirror of your internal vibration. When you stop forcing life, you discover that in fact, it was never against you. She was just waiting for you to stop swimming against the tide. May you trust enough to float. And floating, you realize that you are being carried, not away from yourself, but back home. The journey continues. Let's dive even deeper. And it is in this dive that you find silence. Not the silence of the absence of sounds, but the silence of the mind that finally quiets down. The mind that always wanted answers, control, guarantees, now begins to rest in the confidence that the flow of life knows the way. And in that silence, something rare is born: clarity. You realize that many of the choices you made in life were based on fear of being alone, of failing, of not being accepted. But now, in this space of presence, you begin to choose from love. Love for yourself, for life, for mystery. And the most curious thing is that the things you wanted so much, peace, connection, meaning, were always available. But they were hidden behind the noise of their fighting. It was like trying to listen to a melody with your headphones at full volume while thinking. When you turn down the volume, when you let go of the control, the music of life starts playing. A song that doesn't come from outside, but from within. And you realize you've never been disconnected, that everything you sought already inhabited your own being. Alan Watts said that the ego is like a ghost trying to hold its own shadow. It is a futile attempt to grasp the intangible. And maybe that's why we push so hard, because we try all the time to give substance to an image, to keep an illusion standing. But the truth is that you are not the image you projected, nor the name you carry, nor the roles you play. You are the space where all this happens, the silent backdrop behind all forms, and this space doesn't need effort. He just is. When you align with this inner space, you begin to perceive life as it really is, impermanent, mysterious, fluid, and that instead of scaring starts to free you, because if everything changes, then nothing needs to be fixed. If everything passes, then even suffering is a visitor, not a sentence. You learn to surf the waves of existence lightly, knowing that no wave is definitive, that everything comes and goes. And in this back and forth you learn to dance. But make no mistake, this dance requires presence. You can't dance with life while you're stuck in the past or anxious about the future. You need to be here, feel the ground, listen to the rhythm, connect with the instant. And this is something that is not forced, it is allowed. Allow yourself to be with what you are, the way you are. And little by little, this state of permission becomes a habit, a practice, a way of living. Things that once seemed urgent lose their importance. You start to make more authentic choices. Say no more easily. Say yes with more presence. You become less driven by guilt or obligation and more guided by truth and consistency. And little by little life reorganizes itself, not because you planned it, but because you harmonized. And inner harmony always generates reflections in the outside world. You stop being the one who tries to fix everything and start being the one who welcomes everything. You realize that even moments of pain have a sacred role. They show you where you are still trying to force yourself, where you are still stuck, where you have not yet surrendered. Pain becomes a teacher, not an enemy, and you start to be grateful even for the thorns, because you know that they are guiding you back to your center. Living without forcing does not mean living without intention. It means living with abandon. Do what needs to be done, but without attachment to the result. Act, but let life complete the gesture, like someone who plants a seed and trusts in time, in the earth, in the sun. There is no way to rush the sprout. There is only way to nourish the soil. So too with your dreams, your relationships, your projects. You do your part and allow the rest to come at the right time. And often what comes is better than what you imagined. Because when you stop forcing, you make room for the unexpected. And it's in the unexpected that magic lives. And when you really open yourself up to the unexpected, something profound happens. Life stops being a sequence of goals to be achieved and becomes a creative expression of your most authentic self. You are no longer chasing an ideal. You are allowing the real to reveal itself. And the real is always richer, more nuanced, more alive than any plan your mind can construct. you begin to realize that what escapes you when you force it is precisely what matters most: the spontaneity, the surprise, the beauty of what is born without effort. It's curious how in nature nothing forces anything. The flower doesn't try to bloom, it blooms. The sun doesn't need to make an effort to shine, it simply shines. Birds don't calculate each flight, they just fly. But we human beings have lost this ability to simply be. We become obsessed with controlling, predicting, improving. We think we constantly need to adjust, polish ourselves, improve ourselves, as if life were an eternal job interview. And in this, we disconnect from something essential, the entirety of simply being alive. And living deep down is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. It's being present with what is, without resisting, without hiding. But this simplicity is scary, because it leaves us naked. No shields, no masks, no justifications. When you stop forcing it, you begin to see clearly where you were lying to yourself, where he was sabotaging himself, where I was trying to look like something I didn't feel, and that hurts. But it is a liberating pain, because for the first time you begin to truly find yourself, to recognize your light and your shadow, to be accepted, not as a project to be improved, but as a mystery to be lived. And in this state of acceptance, everything changes. The weather changes. The quality of relationships changes. Even the body changes, because it feels like it can relax, that you no longer need to carry the armor of constant demands, that can breathe. And when the body breathes, the soul also breathes. There is a deep relief in no longer needing to prove anything, in simply being. And it is in this being that true creativity is born, because creativity doesn't come from tension, it comes from space. And when there is space, life creates through you. Ideas emerge, solutions appear, connections reveal themselves. Alan Watts reminded us that life is a performance without rehearsal. There is no script, there is no fixed stage, there is no judging audience, there is only the present moment. And if you can surrender to it, you will see that everything you were trying to build with effort was already available with ease. But lightness only comes when you trust. Trust that you don't need to push existence, that you are not here to fix the world, but to dance with it, to participate fully in the great theater of impermanence. And the more you dance, the more you realize that the very idea of control is a dream that was taught to us from an early age, but which is not sustainable. Life cannot be controlled because it is not linear. It is circular, cyclical, paradoxical. Sometimes what seems like an end is the beginning of something bigger. Sometimes what you wanted to avoid at all costs is exactly what you needed to experience to awaken. And when you accept this, not as theory, but as lived experience, something inside you expands. You stop running, stop fighting, and start listening. Listen to yourself. Listen to the silences. Listen to what the moment is saying even when words fail. And this listening is revolutionary, because it takes us out of our heads and returns us to our hearts. It takes us out of the logic of productivity and reconnects us to the wisdom of presence. And in this presence, the whole world fits. There's pain, there's joy, there's not knowing. Love fits with all its beauty and imperfection. It fits now with all its nuances. And in this, now everything is complete. Let's continue. The current still has a lot to reveal, and in that continuity you begin to realize that there is something deeply sacred about letting things be as they are. Not because everything is always pleasant, but because everything is always true, if you are really present. And the truth, although uncomfortable, has the power to heal. She shows us with silent clarity where we are forcing, where we are running away, where we are insisting on something that already demands an end. And when you stop forcing, you start listening to this truth. Not the absolute truth, but the truth of your moment, the truth that pulsates between the lines of everyday life, in the details that the rush does not allow us to see. And it's curious how when you start living like this, without rushing, without resistance, life responds differently. What previously seemed blocked begins to open. What you forced and didn't happen happens naturally when you let go. It's as if the universe said, now yes, now you are ready to receive. Because while you are forcing, you are saying without even realizing it, I don't trust. And where there is no trust, there is no room for miracles. But when you let go, you are saying, I trust, I am open, I allow. And this permission opens doors that effort would never open. Because effort comes from fear, but permission comes from love. And love, true love, the one that doesn't demand, doesn't manipulate. This love is the most powerful force that exists. It transforms without forcing. It heals without invading. It guides without getting stuck. And when you start living from that place, everything changes. Because you no longer need life to be a specific way to be happy. You start to be happy with what you are. And that is freedom. It's like stopping paddling and realizing that the current is taking you to an even more beautiful place than the one you had planned. It's like dropping a crumpled map and discovering that the path was engraved within you the whole time. It's like taking off your headphones and listening to the music the world is playing right now, just for you. And this music has ups and downs, it has pauses, it has dissonances, but it also has harmony, it has beauty, it has rhythm. And you start dancing with her. Not because you understand it, but because you feel it. And the more you feel, the more you realize that what really matters cannot be forced. Love cannot be forced. Peace cannot be forced. Authenticity cannot be forced. Life in its deepest essence does not respond to force. It responds to surrender. And this surrender is not giving up. It is intelligence. It's realizing that sometimes the only thing that separates us from fulfillment is the belief that we need to fight for it. Alan Watts said that trying to be spontaneous is like trying to sleep. The more you try, the harder it gets. Because there are things that only happen when you stop trying. And life is one of those things. You don't live it. You allow yourself to be lived by it. You become a channel, a vehicle, an expression, and in this state everything flows, everything sings, everything dances. But this dance requires humility. Humility to admit that we don't know everything, that we don't control everything, that life is bigger than our plans, bigger than our fears, bigger than our will, and that far from being desperate is liberating, because if you no longer need to control everything, you can finally rest, you can finally breathe, you can finally live. And living in this new way of being is no longer a task, it's a gift that is renewed every moment, that reveals itself in the simple, in the now, in the silence. When you stop forcing, you reconnect with the miracle of existence. And then even small gestures, a look, a touch, a sigh, become sacred. Because you are whole in them, because you are no longer trying to get somewhere else, you have arrived, and you realize that deep down you were never far away. You were just distracted, trying to control what could only be felt. And at this point along the way, when you finally let go, what was chaos reveals itself as order. Not a rigid order, imposed by rules or expectations, but a living, pulsating order that manifests itself through the simple fact that everything is exactly where it should be. Even the mistake, even the fall, even what you once cursed for not going the way you wanted. Everything has its place, and when you stop pushing, you start to see that place. You begin to realize that the universe doesn't make mistakes. It just follows a rhythm that the mind often doesn't understand. That's where you come to terms with time. Stop seeing him as an enemy, as a tyrant who pushes you, who charges you, who persecutes you. Time now becomes an ally, a silent master who shows that everything has its time, that the seed needs darkness before it blooms, that winter is as necessary as spring, that there is beauty even in waiting, and you finally learn to wait without anxiety, learn to act without agitation, learn to trust without needing to understand. This trust is not based on guarantees, it is based on presence. In being here now whole, with everything you are, and with everything you don't yet know how to be. And that's enough. That was always enough. But you only realize it when you stop pushing yourself forward, as if life were always a few steps ahead. She's not. Life is where you are. There is no other place. There is no other time. Just this eternal moment that slips between your fingers when you try to hold it, but embraces you when you just feel it. And in this feeling, you stop looking for life as an external object and begin to recognize it as something that pulses. Within you, you are the flow, you are the dance, you are the silence between thoughts, you are the one who observes everything without needing to judge, and in that space there is peace. Not the peace of someone who solved all their problems, but the peace of someone who accepted that they don't need to solve everything to live fully. This is the paradox: when you stop forcing life, it starts to really happen. And everything you desperately sought, love, joy, meaning, begins to find you. Because you made space, because you got out of the way, because finally you remembered who you are, not the doer, but the being, not the controller, but the participant, not the master, but the eternal apprentice of this art called living. So the next time you feel the need to push, to rush, to control, stop, breathe, listen. Ask yourself, what if I just trusted? Maybe life has been waiting for this moment to finally dance with you. If this video touched you in any way, leave a like. It helps more people find this message. Share with someone who needs to let go of control a little, and remember that life happens better when it's light. And if you want to continue on this journey of awakening and reflection, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss the next videos. The dance continues, and you are part of it.